New concerns about safety across the U.S. this week as reports show a significant number of counterterrorism officials have left the FBI. This comes after the violent incidents at home this week, an attack at a Michigan synagogue and the shooting at Old Dominion University in Virginia that left one victim dead and two injured. Joining me now is Stacey Young, a former senior trial attorney who spent nearly 2 decades at the Department of Justice. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here, Stacey. I do want to get one quick question on regarding the developments involving Fed Chair Jerome Powell, because that federal judge tossed out subpoenas the DOJ issued against Powell, saying their purpose was to pressure Powell, and the government provided exactly zero evidence of wrongdoing. The judge heavily emphasized Trump's public attacks on Powell. You resigned from the DOJ last year. You then started Justice Connection. That's an organization to support officials during unprecedented times. What does all this say about Trump going after perceived enemies?
Judge Boasberg clearly called a spade in this case. This is one of many examples of DOJ bringing investigations or prosecutions simply because individuals are perceived enemies of the president. In this particular case, Judge Boasberg was correct. There was a mountain of evidence that demonstrated that DOJ brought this case not to actually enforce the law in any good faith way, but to advance President Trump's political agenda and to retaliate against one of his perceived enemies. And make no mistake about how extraordinary this is. There's a really low standard to get a grand jury subpoena, and it's exceptionally unusual to get one quashed. Hopefully this investigation won't continue any further, and hopefully we won't see a prosecution develop from it.
Okay, let's get now to the national security. The 2 terror attacks on Thursday, one at a Michigan synagogue, the other at Old Dominion University in Virginia, amid an increase in domestic threats as the war in Iran continues. MS Now reports the FBI lost around 300 national security agents since Trump returned to office. So with the loss of experience and manpower, how prepared is the Bureau to stop attacks in the U.S.? Are things slipping through the cracks?
Fortunately, I think that most national security experts would tell you that we are not as prepared as we were before this administration to address some of the threats we're facing today, some of the incidents that we saw last week. Hundreds of experienced national security experts have been purged from DOJ, from the National Security Division, and from the FBI. That is unprecedented. And it's also reckless and dangerous and dumb. And we're dealing with a situation where we chose to go to war with Iran at a time when the apparatuses that should keep the homeland safe when you wage a war against one of the top state sponsors of terrorism are not as prepared to deal with it. And again, there was no reason to purge these individuals. And it's leaving us far more vulnerable at a really perilous moment.
Well, in fact, Trump addressed this growing concern around sleeper cells here in the U.S. He did it on Wednesday. Let's take a listen together.
A lot of people came in through Biden with this stupid open border, but we know where most of them are. We've got our eye on all of them, I think.
Stacey, do you buy that? I mean, given the decrease in staffing, is that even possible to have an eye on everyone with intent to harm the U.S.?
President is correct. There are sleeper cells in our country. They pose very serious threats, but we can't possibly be as prepared to deal with those threats when we've gutted national security experts from DOJ and the FBI, some of the top national security experts in our country, people who ran offices that work on counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cyber terrorism. These are people who knew what they were doing, who led thousands of FBI agents whose job is to keep us safe. We are simply less safe right now, and we made the decision to go to war with a very dangerous country. And now in this country, we are much less prepared to deal with the consequences of that.
Here's what we have today. FBI agents who rely on a surveillance tool to track suspected terrorists. But MS Now is reporting applications to use this tool have fallen more than 50% in the last year. And just this week, FBI Director Kash Patel, who is a huge fan of UFC fighting, enlisted the help of UFC cage fighters to spend this weekend, today and tomorrow, training FBI agents in martial arts and how to body slam targets. What does this tell you about the FBI focus right now?
It tells me that we have the most unserious individual running the FBI that we've ever had. And when we seem to be dealing with very serious threats, the FBI director disappears. He was in Milan chugging beer with Olympic hockey players right before this country went to war. And when he is doing his job, he's spending some of it firing the people who keep our country safe. There's a banner hanging on the Justice Department building right now that has President Trump's face prominently displayed, and it says, "Making America safe again." That is the opposite of what this administration is doing at DOJ and the FBI, and it's terrifying.
Stacey Young, duly noted on all. Thank you so much for joining us.